Welcome everybody to the Transportation Finance and Policy Committee for this Tuesday, March 21st. Three bills on the calendar today, and we'll start with the approval of the minutes of March 17th. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would love to move the minutes of March 17th.
Minutes are moved. Is there discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, the motion prevails. So members, just to preview the week a little bit, we're heading into our deadline for the omnibus finance bill, and so we'll have a mixture of bills this week, but primarily focusing on different components of finance items that are for possible inclusion. We're going to hear these bills, we're going to lay them over. There are some of these bills will have some amendments to them. Those amendments are really for discussion purposes. We're not going to move those either. But the idea here is that pieces that the major pieces of the finance bill will have gotten a hearing in this committee. So with that, we're going to start with House File sorry about that, 1012, and that's Representative Petersburg's bill, and welcome to the, I'm not welcoming you to the committee per se, Representative Petersburg, but I'm welcoming you to our process for building a finance bill. And before Representative Petersburg starts and moves his bill, I want to acknowledge members on this committee and at least one other member who's not on the committee who have worked on the issue of small cities. As you know, and funding for small cities. As you know, this has been an issue that's been before this committee for many, many years. We have hoped, and really the issue is whether we can find money on an ongoing, sustained basis for small cities. We funded small cities at various levels with one-time money, and I believe Representative Petersburg's bill is one vehicle, one possibility to do that. But we've had, again, this has been such an important issue for members on both sides of the aisle that I wanted to acknowledge the members and their bills that relate to this topic of small cities. So first, I want to thank Representative Fogelman for House File 1442. Representative Olson, pass on to him that I'm giving him a shout out for 1291. Representative Brand, you've introduced House File 2600. And Representative Robbins has introduced House File 1015 that also deals with this issue. And if I have left anyone out, I'm sure I will be notified of that. But so you're really the fifth member, Representative Petersburg, that has brought this issue up, and we appreciate it very much. So with that, Representative Petersburg, please move your bill, and looking forward to hearing more about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to move 1012 to be laid over for possible inclusion in your wonderful omnibus bill.
Okay, members. Yeah. He's now quoted saying the omnibus bill is wonderful. Please note that for the record in the minutes. Thank you very much for bringing this bill, Representative Petersburg. Looking forward to hearing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this bill is really an opportunity for us to pull the rest of the auto part sales tax from the general fund into transportation. And it's something that will, as you said, bring a little bit more funding into, that is more dependable and reliable, into transportation. And it also gives money to townships. Now, you talked about small cities, but townships who represent about 46% of all the roads in the state of Minnesota currently get virtually none, no dollars from the state in order to help maintain those roads. And for a lot of people out in greater Minnesota, and some here in this inside metro area, that's maybe the last or first mile that people drive before they get onto the trunk highway system. So it's an important piece for us to do. Basically, what this bill does is it pulls the rest of it away, which is somewhere, and if you see the spreadsheet that Andrew Lee put together, it's going to pull about another $362 million into transportation, in which my bill says 8% will go to small cities, and 8% will go to townships, and the rest will go into HUTD, the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund. So that gives about almost, it gives quite a bit more to the general fund, or not to the fund, but to the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund. And that's a positive piece as well. So with that, Mr. Chair, that is my bill, and I will leave it open for testifiers.
Thank you. We'll have some testifiers and then some committee discussion before we formally lay the bill over. And I did want to just point out one other thing related to the small city and township allocations in this bill. There's varying proposals and varying ideas floating around as to what the percentages are on here. I think Representative Wilson might have been as high as 12%. And so there's a range, and that is really something we're going to have to mull over as we build the bill. But again, think about this as a placeholder for those allocations. So members, we have, again, we'll start with brief testimony from, let's see, we have, well, a number of testifiers. We'll start with Caitlin Snyder from Education Minnesota. Welcome back to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Caitlin Snyder with Education Minnesota. We represent 86,000 educators across the state. As public employees, we understand how inconsistent and insufficient state funding can be and how this impacts public service. I'm sorry, I ran over here because I thought we'd be later on the agenda. We understand how inconsistent and insufficient state funding can impact public employees across Minnesota. Each year, teachers, school employees, nurses, correctional officers, and other public employees are laid off, and our students, patients, and communities pay the price. We understand why some people would like to limit this instability by having dedicated funding to transportation, but we ask that you oppose House File 1012 or similar language. It would remove over $200 million in the current fiscal year from the general fund. This proposal would send sales tax from auto parts to a special account to pay for roads and bridges. This money would no longer be available for schools, nursing homes, local police and fire departments, healthcare, or other areas of the state budget. Minnesota has a tradition of electing leaders who respond to the needs of Minnesotans while protecting the long-term financial stability of our state government. It is why Minnesota has a budget surplus, and it is why Minnesota has a AAA bond rating. Unfortunately, this proposal threatens Minnesota's reputation and could limit its ability to adapt to the changing needs of its people. This bill is also particularly ill-timed as the federal government recently invested over $4 billion for road and bridge projects in Minnesota over the next 5 years. Repairing roads is important, but so is caring for the elderly and people with disabilities, educating our children, reducing the cost of higher education, funding our state pensions, increasing access to affordable health care, keeping communities safe with well-equipped firefighters and police officers, and guaranteeing clean air and safe water for everyone. The upkeep of Minnesota's roads and bridges is a serious issue. It deserves dedicated funding and not a one-time or not a temporary increase. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Devin Bruce from MAPE.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. My name is Devin Bruce. I'm the Public Affairs Coordinator for the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees, MAPE. We represent over 15,000 state professionals across all agencies, boards, and commissions. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to quickly testify on House File 1012 in opposition to the full sales tax, auto parts sales tax dedication. House File 1012, despite having different funding allocations, suffers from a fundamental flaw. It proposes to use bad fiscal policy to cover for the lack of political will by the legislature to address the growing backlog in deferred maintenance for our transportation system. Statutory dedication of over $200 million in fiscal years 24 and 25, growing to by almost more than $100 million in the next biennium. By permanently removing it from the general fund, not only is less available for other priorities like public safety and education that Ms. Snyder discussed, or tax relief for low-income families, childcare tax credits, statutory dedication binds the hands of future legislatures to address a crisis. With the current funding surplus, largely one-time money, the numerous funding streams that are already dedicated to transportation, IIJA federal money, capital investment, including GO bonds and trunk highway funds, it's clear that transportation isn't short on available funding, but instead short on the political will to prioritize and appropriate the money. May proposes and will continue to propose any and all permanent dedication of general fund money for any purpose, whether that's roads, bridges, transit, state agencies, K-12 education, or public safety. Don't shirk your responsibility to make tough budget decisions, and please oppose the full statutory dedication of auto parts sales tax in this and other proposals. Thank you.
Thanks for your testimony. Next, we have Ann Finn. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ann Finn. I represent the League of Minnesota Cities. We are a statewide association representing 838 of Minnesota's 855 cities. More than 700 of our cities are below 5,000 in population, and they would directly benefit from the Small Cities Assistance Program funding in this bill, and we strongly support it. One of the things we hear about the most since the creation of that account is that the cities that are recipients of the dollars that come from it are extremely appreciative. But since it's been funded sporadically, they don't have the ability to plan for the use of those funds because it's only been funded 4 times since it was created in 2015. So to make the most of this money, it would be helpful to have this bill enacted so that the funds can be planned for and cities can use the dollars to do pavement management plans and save up for projects to make the most bang for the buck with the dollars that come. So we want to thank Representative Petersburg for carrying this bill and express our firm support. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have David Thompson from Crooked Lake Township,
I think he might be on Zoom, maybe.
joining us by Zoom.
Yes.
Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. We can see you.
Yes, good morning. I'm David Thompson, Township Supervisor for Crooked Lake Township. I was elected to this position last fall for Crooked Lake Township. My township is located in Cass County. I'm a township, the supervisors for road and bridges. I spent 35 years working county government, specifically in public works. Like all townships, we cover 36 square miles within our boundaries. We have 34 miles of roads that our township maintenance department takes care of. We have no cities within our township, which in turn makes for low population numbers. This in turn makes it really hard to tax the residents the amount needed to fulfill the services within our township. The township has been, over the last 10, 12 years, worked hard to keep our levy low with few increases. And the last 3 years, with the economy and things, it's taken a large chunk of our buying power. Our tax levy for 2023 is $448,864. Of that amount, Road and Bridge receives $167,200. That is less than about half of what we need to maintain our roads. Last year, as well as this year, there's not enough money to gravel 12 miles of our road system, 6 miles for each year. Any maintenance that's put off will always cost more when we can get to it in the future. This year, if we could do what we needed, we should have approximately $441,000 to do the work that we need to do. That's almost our entire budget for our township. We have equipment, rubber tire backhoe, it's over 40 years old, a dump truck over 20 years old. To replace that dump truck, it's over $310,000. It's not possible to bring in enough money to purchase these items without placing an undue burden on the residents that they cannot afford. If we lease, we lose more money with the interest we have to pay. 3 years ago, we spent $12,000 on diesel fuel. Last year, we spent just under $20,000 on diesel fuel. The money also affects our fire department. Our fire department covers 2 townships as well as providing mutual aid for 3 other fire departments. We have 6 large fire apparatuses. All are usable, however, 4 should be replaced. To replace all 4 pieces would cost over $1.5 million. That would be another burden that would be too much for our residents to handle. The median age of our township is 62.5 years old. We are a township of mostly retired people on a fixed income called Social Security. At our annual meeting, we explained the need to our residents and asked for a 15% increase. Our residents responded by giving us a 25%. They voted to approve a 25% increase. So our residents are doing all they can. Any bill that can provide funding to townships would be a great help. The cost of equipment, gravel, fuel, to name a few items, rise so fast that as a township cannot keep pace with the need to require the funds to keep going on that, to providing that. Yes, we've applied for grants. We have very little success with those. Any funding through the state would be a great help to us. I am in favor of this bill going forward. Thank you, Representative Petersburg, for bringing this bill forward. I ask that the committee members consider to financially help all townships. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Next, we have Shane Zart, followed by Bentley Graves, and I'd ask people to stay within our time limit guidelines. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Shane Zart with the firm Flaherty and Hood and representing the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. And want to express our support and our gratitude to Representative Petersburg, but also every name you listed off at the beginning of the hearing who have carried bills to fund and support the Small Cities Assistance Program. And if you look at that list, I think it underscores the importance of this issue. Representative Brandt, Representative Olson, former local elected officials themselves, Representative Fogelman has, I think, a particularly compelling set of cases in her district, which a lot of those cities that fall just under the 5,000 population. The city of Windham is an example of that. So we hope that this can finally be the session that we do finally take care of getting the small cities some sustained, dedicated funding that they can rely on and plan for. And this is just one of the approaches to do that. I will say, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to hear you say that these numbers are placeholders. If you ask a lot of our Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities members, yes, the Small Cities Association, we're all targeting the number about $40 million a year. We think is where the number needs to be to going to be divided among the more than 700 cities in Minnesota that are under 5,000 and provide them the support they need for their roads. And I do want to acknowledge some of the other testimony and acknowledge our organization's position. We have a number of members who were council members, city staff, mayors during the times when the state's budget was lean and lived through things like LGA cuts because there was pressure on the general fund. So our organization has been at times wary of approaches that shift money from the general fund to transportation purposes or other purposes. But we also have a number of members, especially in that small city category, who have lived through now decades of trying to maintain their roads without this ongoing support. So the approach in this bill, we understand, is a balance, a compromise, but on balance, our members would love to see that ongoing and dedicated funding. So thank you, and I'll leave it there, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And we have an additional testifier, I think, to this point. So welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and to Representative Petersburg. My name is Cap O'Rourke. I am the chair of the Minnesota Association of Small Cities. We want to strongly support ongoing and dedicated funding to the Small Cities Assistance Account. As many of the previous testifiers had said, we have not had ongoing dedicated funding for this account in ever. It has been sporadic one-time funding, and as a result, many of our small cities under 5,000, have not only had the adequate money that they need to adjust their roads, they haven't been able to plan. They haven't been able to set aside money for larger projects. So having money such as this, ongoing dedicated funding that they can not only use to fix their roads, but also plan for the larger projects that are coming down, especially those when they're gonna need a local match for state and county projects, is extremely imperative. So we support these efforts, and we urge you to do ongoing dedicated funding. And as Mr. Zart and others have said, our need ask is for $40 million per year. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. O'Rourke, I wanted to mention to you and Mr. Zart that we'll be looking at a combination. There are other sources of funding, road and bridge funding that we're considering, including, you'll see an A1 amendment in the next bill. We have Representative Cagle's bill. And so we have other sources of funding in addition to this. And so we might be mixing and matching to get to the needs. But of course, so much of this depends on our target, and we're waiting to hear.
And yes, and to that point, Mr. Chair, I would say that we have been agnostic as to the source of the funding for small cities. We just want to make sure that it is a reliable source.
Thank you. We have two more testifiers, Bentley Graves, and then we'll conclude the public testimony with John Thorson. Mr. Graves, welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Bentley Graves from the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. We represent more than 6,000 employers across the state and more than 500,000 employees across the state of Minnesota. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to testify today. When it comes to transportation funding, the Chamber has long seen increases in investment in our infrastructure as a policy priority. However, we know, as everybody in this committee knows, that significant needs remain despite the fact that investments have been made over the last many years. Just to kind of put this into context, whether that's funding to improve safety and congestion on the intersection of 169 and County Road 4 in Zimmerman, that's a priority for the Elk River Area Chamber of Commerce, or money to construct a grade separated multimodal crossing on Highway 13 being championed by the Burnsville Chamber of Commerce to decrease congestion and improve safety. Or, as several members of the committee know very well, the significant amount of funding the Metro North Chamber is advocating for to address the major congestion and safety concerns along Highway 65. We know and we recognize that an increased investment is needed. And when it comes to this particular proposal, we know that there are many moving pieces to it, that there are many different ways to kind of slice and dice the funding that would be made available to it. But at a high level, we have been very strong supporters of using 100% of the revenues from the sales tax on auto parts for transportation for a very long time. We made some progress towards this in 2017. But unfortunately, that was a move that set a portion of those revenue sources for transportation, set it as a static number in statute. And as a result, the buying power of those dollars, not surprisingly, has gone down over time. In 2017, the $145 million that came from the auto parts to transportation represented about half of the total auto parts receipts. Now that's down closer to 40%. So getting 100% of these dollars into transportation, we believe with an $18 billion surplus is very much the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to opportunities to increase investment in transportation. But also will ensure that we have another revenue source in the mix to support our transportation infrastructure that very importantly will grow over time and keep pace, as Mr. Thompson from the township said, will keep pace with the ever-increasing cost of construction and maintenance of our transportation infrastructure. So I want to thank Representative Petersburg and the many members that have championed various versions of this proposal over the many years. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing this hearing today, and we look forward to working with you and others and finding this in the transportation funding bill that's yet to come. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. And finally, we have John Thorson from Liuna. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is John Thorson. I'm Legislative Director for Liuna, Minnesota, North Dakota. We're Minnesota's infrastructure union, representing more than 13,000 skilled construction laborers who build and maintain the roads, bridges, highways, transit, and critical utilities that allow our communities to thrive. I'm here today to support House File 1012, which would dedicate 100% of sales tax collected from auto part repairs to addressing our transportation infrastructure needs. Minnesota has what is approaching a $30 billion gap over the next 20 years to keep up with our current transportation system. Committing 100% of the sales tax on auto parts and repairs will make us safer, create thousands of family-supporting construction careers, and boost our economy. Our transportation infrastructure needs are great. In fact, the American Society of Civil Engineers has graded our roads a D+, our bridges a C, and our transit a C-. This proposal can accelerate repairs to the over 600 deficient bridges and nearly 5,000 miles of highway that is rated in poor condition. The proposal will launch and maintain thousands of high-quality, family-sustaining, prevailing wage jobs for tradesmen and women all throughout the state, and we're very excited about the career and economic inclusion opportunities that this will bring Minnesota's construction industry. Registered apprenticeship programs support critical efforts that increase participation of women, people of color, veterans, and others not participating in the economy to their fullest potential. And statutory dedication of all auto parts repairs and sales tax will create a more reliable, ongoing funding source to address our critical transportation needs. Mr. Chair, I want to thank Representative Petersburg for bringing this forward. And again, these investments this proposal will make investments we can count on, and will make life better for millions of Minnesotans, create and maintain thousands of union jobs, and fuel our economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thorson. Is there anyone else in the audience that wants to testify either in favor or in opposition, or even take a neutral stand on House File 1012? Okay. So members, we're now in our discussion and question phase. Representative West, you're first on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Petersburg, for bringing this bill. This is a very good bill. I now represent a small city of Columbus, which also would benefit from that 8%. One thing about this discussion so far that is frustrating is certain public sector unions, since they're entitled to the entire general fund, whereas spending money somewhere isn't taking money from somewhere else. We have $20 billion. That's a disingenuous argument. And I've never seen Education Minnesota testify against increased LGA funding or anything like that. It seems that their only issue with roads. And what's frustrating about that is roads are a core function of government. Everybody in this room agrees with that. The public agrees with that. And when you tell somebody in the public that we spend less than 1% of our general fund on transportation, they are blown away. Sure, we have all these other funds, but those funds are declining, as we've talked about many times in this committee. We're not going to be able to do what the needed expansion we need, particularly on Highway 65, without significant new money. And this brings in significant new money. I don't see how we could possibly do any of these projects beyond just maintaining our current grid without new money. And it's great for jobs in this state. As you heard from multiple other unions, they need this money so that we can have consistent, reliable construction jobs on our roads in Minnesota. So I really appreciate you bringing this bill. I have my own bill for this that actually cuts in transit just for the chair. Oh, okay. But whatever can get this done, because roads like Highway 65 won't get done without this. We have $20 billion, so raising fees and taxes don't make sense. This is the right approach, and we probably need even more. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Weston. Sorry, I had a feeling I left someone out of that long list, but thank you for mentioning that. Representative Brand, and then Representative Murphy, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my comments are that, you know, in my district in particular, I've got small cities that don't have some of the things that even my home community has in St. Peter. Some of the communities I represent don't even have curb and gutter, because in those communities, that's like an extra. That's like an extra that they don't have money for. And, you know, when we talk about things like climate change and all of these volumes of water coming at once, curb and gutter can help mitigate some of the homeowners' loss to their yards and things of that nature. So that's unfortunate that we don't, small cities just don't have, or they're just not equipped for that. I'll just point out that the city of Slayton, which seems like a poster child for the discussion about small cities funding. If you look at the third paragraph in the handouts, it says in the first sentence, this puts our communities in an incredible difficult situation in which we cannot fund an essential project without massively burdening our property taxpayers. Having consideration for small cities funding, having consideration for township funding, that is property tax really for the people who live in those areas. And, you know, even in the townships where I represent, I can tell you that they're not flush with cash. They have to make decisions about whether or not they can maintain the roads that they have in their communities. And so, or in their townships rather. And so, you know, I think as we go forward, you know, we have to consider something. I will just remind everybody that last year there was a proposal very close to this where there was 100% dedication of the these auto part sales. And in the Senate, I just remember or was reminded that the majority of our senators in the other body voted for that in a bipartisan way. And I hope that we can come to some sort of a conclusion this year on finding some solution for our small cities and townships, because I can tell you that they feel left out, and the burden is great for the folks that live there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and we have Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Bring
Thank
us
you
home.
for Representative Petersburg and Representative West and Representative Fogelman for bringing this. I'm a past township supervisor, and I can just tell you that this money will be well spent. These people do a great job of identifying the problems for the surrounding cities and townships. I don't have a single city in my district that's over 5,000 people. But every city's got, just about everyone's got a school and got elder care in it, and it's all about community. But they definitely need to have and want to have good roads and good streets. And we had one bridge that burnt down. It was a wooden bridge. Well, it really messed up public safety. It was really difficult to get for people to get around it. And those things, they need to have that extra funding to be able to do that. So I just thank Representative Peters for bringing this bill up and definitely in support of it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any final comments, Representative Petersburg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would just say that we heard again the concern about taking this out of the general fund, which has been the problem in the past about pulling general fund dollars into transportation. But I want to remind us all that, especially in a surplus situation, that's not true. But even so, remind us all that it doesn't matter if it's in transportation funding or general fund, it still all comes from our taxpayers. Okay, so it's still the taxpayer's pocket that we're dipping into. And this is an opportunity for us to also remind ourselves that no matter what program that you want to fund through general fund, whether it's education, health and human services, ag, labor, all are dependent, 100% dependent upon roads and bridges and transit. Okay, and so the idea that increased funding to transportation isn't also a benefit to them is also maybe a little bit on the short-sighted side of that. The other part of it is small cities and townships, and as I said earlier, townships represent about 46% of all of the roads in the state, have never had any dependable source of revenue that they can plan on. This gives us an opportunity for us to do that. So in all of those issues, I think it is time for us to get this past the deadline, past the finish line, and get those dollars pulled in. Most people are thinking that user fees for the roads and bridges, as tab fees and so forth, sales tax and auto parts make sense as well, and so I think it's possible. Mr. Chair, I'm expecting that you will get a target big enough to at least cover this bill as well. And so I appreciate your support, and with that, Mr. Chair, I would move House File 1012 be laid over for possible inclusion.
Thank you very much. House File 1012 is laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus finance bill and policy. Thank you, Representative Petersburg. And now I'm going to hand over the gavel to our Vice Chair.
All right, thank you much, Mr. Chair. We are moving on to House File 2700 now. And Mr. Chair, after you get settled, if you could, please move your bill.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair and members, I'm going to move that House File 2700 be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. And I do have an author's amendment, A2, that I'd like the committee to consider.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If you'll explain your amendment, and then we'll attach that as an author's amendment.
Thank you. We'll be hearing momentarily, members, about microtransit. In our bill, we have money set aside for Metro Transit and the suburban providers. There's also an interest in this in greater Minnesota, and so A2 comes to us from Rochester, and so I'd like to incorporate that into the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion passes. And, Mr. Chair, to your bill.
So thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and we are looking, this bill will be forward-looking in many, many ways. And when it comes to transit, not only will we be looking at improving our local transit systems, that we'll hear from Representative Jordan about that tomorrow evening, in some innovative ways. Funding arterial bus rapid transit is one of them. But I think a new and very important development in transit we've started to hear about in this committee over the last biennium or two is a concept called microtransit. And that is, how do we get people from that last transit stop to their homes, that last mile or two? And I've been very impressed over the years with the work that's been done in the South Metro, which we'll hear about in a minute. That program should be replicated throughout the state. And again, this is, I think, one of the next frontiers, if you will, in transit, public transportation, and I think will really help improve ridership and get people to where they're going in a cost-effective and efficient manner. So with that, members, I'd be happy to defer to our testifier for this bill, and then we can take questions.
Good morning, Mr. Winder. You have 2 minutes. Please present, testify, not present your testimony. That, whatever makes sense.
Thank you. Good morning, committee. I'm Luther Winder, Chief Executive Officer for Minnesota Valley Transit Authority. I'd like to first thank, obviously, our sponsor and the champion that we've had with Representative Hornstein for support of microtransit, as well as all transit statewide.
Mr. Winder, could you get the microphone?
All transit statewide here in Minnesota. I always think I speak up, but I don't, so I apologize for that in advance. First, let me start off talking about what microtransit is. Microtransit operates similarly to on-demand rides offered by Uber and Lyft, but there's a difference, a really distinct difference. It's far less expensive to the customer. It's also more and more efficient for us to ride in public transit. It relies on technology to improve service efficiencies and reduce costs in less dense areas, and that's the key, less dense areas where this operates. Microtransit was first conceptualized as a first and last mile solution for work commuters, but has become a mobility lifeline for thousands living and working in suburbs who have serious mobility needs. Microtransit, when I say lifeline, really is a lifeline. It's about access. Because if you don't have sidewalks, if you don't have access to a bus, a regular fixed route bus, if you don't have a disability, that means you don't have a car. That means all you have is your feet. And that means you do not have the ability to access anything as far as employment, groceries in the region. Microtransit helps solve that. It's important to note that Southwest started this service back in 2015. They were actually a model not only for Minnesota, but for the nation. Introducing, when it comes to technology into providing small service on a small service bus around the Southwest Metro. They now have over 22 buses and do over 100,000 trips a year. Minnesota Valley started our service in the same footprint in 2019. We started with two retired cutaways, so we didn't have the funding to purchase any additional buses. Now we have 19, 6 of which are pass-through for life, 5 of which spend a lot of time and spend a lot of time in the shop. We average almost 90,000 trips a year. It's important to note that as we continue to look at all demographic segments use microtransit, but it's not for non-emergency medical, grocery, food bank, and work connections to major employment centers needed for the disadvantaged and senior populations. The vast majority of Connect rides booked through Minnesota Valley use our newly introduced Ride MBT app, which you'll see funding in to integrate that app with the other microtransit apps around the region. In this particular legislation, House File 2700, which is really important. Microtransit has outgrown pre-pandemic levels and continues to see growth, with demand regularly outpacing and outstripping capacity. Across state providers, I want to talk about who uses the service in a little more granular detail. It's predominantly women. They tend to earn less than $50,000 a year, typically under the age of 30 or over the age of 50. And English is the most represented primary language, but we have riders that speak Spanish, Somalian, Hindu, and several other languages are represented. Since 1996, 25% of all affordable housing was built in our 12 STA communities. Microtransit provided those links to those affordable housing communities, those senior development communities, linking them to our transit stations, as well as to the region as a whole. I don't want to take my time. This bill will help us continue to have fleet modernization expansion, improve and expand our service hours, as well as continue to improve our technology. It's important to note, as we continue to see demand increase, we have continued to see wait times also increase, and our service quality has deteriorated over time. So this funding will help us get back on par and obviously continue to be innovative and continue to make this service a model only for Minnesota, but also for the nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Winder. Discussion from the committee. Representative Sensimiro.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Hornstein, for bringing this bill. I think microtransit is a great program. I'm glad that we can continue funding it. Just a few questions. The first one is, we had the bill regarding TNC's companies a couple weeks ago, and there was, concern about the accessibility of those. Are wondering if micromobility vehicles are ADA accessible.
Yes, just about all of our.
Chair, Mr. Winder.
Apologies. Yes, just about almost, I would say more than 95% of our vehicles are 100% accessible. In Minnesota Valley, 100% of our vehicles are accessible. I do know that there are some other smaller vehicle types that are utilized. The great thing about microtransit is customers dictate the level of service they need. So they're able to go in and tell us in advance if they need a wheelchair, active wheelchair, or if they need some type of mobility assistance in the application, so we can send the right vehicle type to them. But currently today, all our vehicles are ADA accessible, and with this investment in funding, we'll continue to commit to procure those vehicles.
Representative Sensimiro.
Thank you. And then this might be questions for the bill author. Just wondering, so I see the money is going to the Met Council to then distribute, and I'm wondering, is there funding going to Metro Transit?
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, there are three areas in which the funding will go. So Metro Transit has a microtransit pilot project on the north side, and they have done very well with that. We also have the suburban providers and Rochester. So that's covered in the bill, I believe. If not, we'll make sure it is. But the intention is really to have those three providers receive funding from this bill.
Representative Sensimiro.
Thank you. It's not totally clear to me that it is, so maybe just adding a little bit of clarifying.
I know that was, I know Mr. Burris, we talked about that. I don't know if that was added or not, but we will make sure that that's clear. That we have the Metropolitan Council, the suburban providers, and now with this amendment, Greater Minnesota Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Sensimiro.
And then last question, so is everyone using the same app for this, or I see on lines 1.13 software development? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah,
Mr. Chair. Mr. Winder.
I keep doing that. I keep doing it.
We got you. It's all good.
I know. I appreciate it. Currently, right now, there are 4 different apps that are utilized. What we want to start doing is to truly make it a regional. Obviously, we want to, and also expand also to Greater Minnesota on privates as well. We want to make that app available in integration. We embarked with the vendor. It's actually Dallas Area Transit. They're a transit authority out in Dallas. They've done a lot of great work with app development for their microtransit system. They've actually integrated in not only right now we have a holistic app that actually provides, you're able to book your trips, look at fixed route information, as well as in the future even look at Uber and Lyft as well too. It really provides all pinpoints as far as transit. So we have that app. We want to make sure we've looked at the funding, the cost in order to integrate that, make that available to all of the suburban providers and anyone who's also interested in it. So that's where that funding is. If not that, then at least the level to have some level of integration if customers do decide to obviously to go from one system to another.
Representative Sensimiro.
Thank you.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the author. Mr. Chair, I have 2 questions. One is, this is very specific to the replacement service providers. Specifically, are all of them covered with this, or are there some that aren't needing some special assistance?
Yes, 3 of the 4 have asked for funding. One provider, Plymouth, has not asked for additional funding in this legislation, but this bill, but there would be funding in the future if need be in overarching app development, if there was ability for them to come on board, and obviously for that synergy as far as app implementation, synergy, integration.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, and to Chair Hornstein, I see that this is very specific through 25, but you put in a $7.2 million base into the future. How are you anticipating that to be distributed after that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Representative Petersburg. We'll be looking at that in the broader omnibus bill. And again, I think a appropriate distribution between the Metropolitan Council, the suburban providers, and Greater Minnesota Transit.
Thank you.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you.
Real quick, Representative Brand, and then we're gonna move on to 1992.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, Mr. Winder, I'd like to visit with you a little bit more offline about the Greater Minnesota opportunities. An awful lot of medical providers just happen to be in the metro area and not in Greater Minnesota, and as a result, there's a lot of a funnel to the Greater Minnesota communities they have to take to go to the Twin Cities, and sometimes when you're older or you don't have state transit, it becomes quite a roadblock, and so happy to talk with you offline about those opportunities.
Would welcome the opportunity, also welcome the opportunity to share some of the different ideas and different circles we've put in the past in order to kind of meet those needs.
Mr. Chair, closing comments.
No, thank you very much, members, for the consideration. And again, this is, I think, one of the ways in which we're going to be looking forward in this bill on transit. And again, just to reiterate, we're going to be looking at those 3 systems, the main transit systems we have, both in the metropolitan area and in Greater Minnesota, through the Met Council, through the suburban providers, and through our Greater Minnesota Transit systems. And I think to your point, Representative Brand, I think there's some very, very important possibilities in Greater Minnesota for this. Fixed route service isn't always possible in a lot of areas, and I think this will be a very helpful way in which we can expand transit to areas that need it the most in Greater Minnesota. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members, and I would again defer to you, Mr. Chair, for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Hornstein renews his motion that House File 2700 as amended be laid over for possible inclusion in a future omnibus bill. All right, now we're going to move on to 1992. Thank you very much, Mr. Winder. So we have a variety of testifiers on this bill as well, and it's a pretty big bill to go through, so we're gonna keep things moving here. So Mr. Chair, would you like to make a motion for House File 1992?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. I would move that House File 1992 be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus transportation finance and policy bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And we have a A1 amendment that we are not going to adopt today that will be put forward and then withdrawn. So let's talk about the bill first, and then we'll talk about the amendment second. Does that work, or how would you like to handle that?
Would be happy to do that, members.
All right, so Mr. Chair, to the bill.
Thank you, members. So this is the governor's bill. And there are a number of provisions in here that I think are important that we want to put before the committee, discussing it overall, getting questions of agencies answered. We had a budget overview earlier in session, but this is the actual bill that represents the governor's vision for transportation. And again, some of these items will, I think, are general boilerplate, items that we have in any transportation bill. There's others that are additions. The A1 amendment is one that I wanted to put before the committee because it has to do with tab fees. And we anticipate that tab fees will be a part of the mix of items to be considered for funding in this committee, just as the previous bill that Representative Petersburg shared with us will be. And so I wanted to use this opportunity not only to hear from the agencies if people have questions about House File 1992, but also for us to discuss very specifically the tab fee proposal. And this is very different from the tab fee proposal that is in the governor's bill. And so I wanted to be very clear that for the purposes of our committee, we have another option to consider on this. And so that's why we have the A1 amendment. So, Mr. Chair, I think if we want to maybe dive right into the A1 first, and then
Okay.
I can answer any other questions about the bill or have the agencies do that.
Very good. All right, so Mr. Chair, would you like to move the A1 amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to move the A1 amendment.
All right, and further discussion on that, you would like questions now?
Well, I'll just maybe give an overview of this and why it's before us. Tab fees have been kind of a staple of many transportation funding bills over the years. And, you know, there's so this proposal is an increase in tab fees, but I think we do it in a way that is a little less intensive in the first year than the governor does. And then, you know, it's more of a flatter, if you would look at a graph, if you will, it's then more of a flat increase over the in intermediate years, and then actually less of a percentage is paid for the older vehicles in the depreciation schedule in those later years, up to 11 years of tab fee, tab fees that are covered in the bill. So that's the general concept here. We do provide significant new funding here for the HUTD. I know, again, we've had this has been perhaps of the revenue raisers, you know, one that has in the past, I think, had some support from the business community and the other side of the aisle. You know, I'm not saying that that's the case now, but we've had some proposals in the past that did increase tab fees. And so that is the, you know, that's the amendment, and happy to answer any questions or have committee discussion about it.
Questions on the A1 amendment? Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the author, Mr. Chair. So when I did the analysis on this, it looks to me like almost the entire growth in tab fees are going to be in the first 5 years of a vehicle's life. And then the 6th year, it's just a slight increase, and then everything below that, older than that, is actually a slight decrease in that. What was going through your mind in thinking that that's where the growth ought to go rather than distributing it across the schedule?
Chair Hornstein.
Thank you very much, and it's an excellent question, Mr. Chair and Representative Petersburg. It felt we had similar proposal, I think, that Representative Cagle had put forward last year, and I think that if these are not necessarily progressive taxes in any way, shape, or form, right? But if we know that those who are driving older vehicles, you know, may have less resources, and not, of course, across the board, right? It's a variation. But if we could have some of the folks who are driving vehicles 6 years and older pay less of an increase, I think from a fairness standpoint, that was really the idea here.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, and I'm sure we'll have more discussions about that later, but as we start talking about forcing everything going into electric vehicles and the levels that's there, that transition is going to go farther and farther that way too. So I'll be happy to have further discussion at a later date. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Representative Elkins.
Yeah, to that same point, Mr. Chair, I'm in the tax committee this year and made a point of reading the tax incidence study, which shows that even though the current registration fee schedule looks steeply progressive, there are so many more drivers or vehicle owners paying the lower level rates that the tax ends up being actually showing as regressive still in the suits index, which is a little bit surprising, but it's just the average age of a car on the road is over 11 years right now, so that the bulk of the drivers are paying a rate at the lower end of the scale.
Would you like to respond?
No,
Sure.
thank you.
Okay.
I thought that's important to have on the record, Representative Elkins.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion on the A1 amendment, Mr. Chair, would you like to withdraw that
Yeah, I'll
at this
withdraw
point?
the A1, and as Representative Petersburg said, we'll have, you know, we'll be rolling out the bill we hope on Tuesday, and then having public testimony next Thursday, and then markup on Friday. And so we'll have more time to discuss this, but I just wanted to put this out there to the public and to the committee as a actively considered part of our bill, particularly as it relates to a tab fee increase. And there's a spreadsheet as well accompanying this, so you can see the revenue that we're raising for transportation in this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with that, the A1 amendment is withdrawn, and so we'll move to testifiers now.
I think that would be appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair Hornstein. So first is Margaret Donahoe, and then Shane Zart after that. And so we need to leave ample time to discuss this bill, so if everyone will keep it to 2 minutes, you'll hear a timer go off at that point, and then I'll cut you off. I'm not nearly as nice as Chair Hornstein is. Ms. Donahoe, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Margaret Donahoe. I'm the director of the Minnesota Transportation Alliance. The funding shortfall for roads, bridges, and transit continues to grow due to increased demand, aging infrastructure, rising inflation, and transportation revenue sources that are not growing as expected. As you've heard, revenue from the fuel tax is down $38 million from the February 2022 forecast. Tab fees are also down $38 million. MVEST is down almost $80 million for highways and transit. The sales tax on leased vehicles is down $24 million. Only the sales tax on auto parts and rental vehicles has remained relatively stable. It is critical that the legislature not lose this opportunity to pass a comprehensive transportation budget that includes increases in ongoing dedicated revenue for all modes and all jurisdictions. We urge inclusion of the registration tax increase just discussed in the amendment, the vehicle registration renewal surcharge, the equalization of MVEST, and a new metropolitan area sales tax for transit. In addition, the final omnibus transportation funding package should include a retail delivery fee, a surcharge on transportation network companies, and we believe it is very important to finish the job of dedicating the sales tax on auto repair parts to transportation. We would like to see the current $145.6 million per year continue to be deposited in the HUTDF, and we support dedicating a percentage to small cities and a percentage to townships. Given the fact that counties and MSA cities are receiving a reduction in their state aid from the HUTDF for 2023 compared to 2022, we think it makes sense to include a comparable dedication of the sales tax on auto parts directly to the CASA and MSA funds, along with the portion for Greater Minnesota Transit, rather than depositing the remaining revenue into the HUTDF. With a historic budget surplus and growing demands on our transportation system, this is the year for the legislature to prioritize critical safety and mobility investments that will improve the lives of all Minnesotans.
Thank you so much, Ms. Donahoe. I appreciate it. Now we have Shane Zart, followed by Sherry Munyon.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Shane Zart with Flaherty and Hood and testifying on behalf of the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. And since it's my second time at the table, hopefully we don't have to hear the buzzer go off on me here. So again, not to belabor the point on the need for small cities, but just thank you also in the A1 amendment for keeping additional potential funding sources for the Small Cities Assistance Program in the mix as things go forward this year. Also wanted to testify on the A1 amendment, just to say thank you also for the Larger Cities Assistance Account that is on page 4 of the A1 amendment. That concept is one that I know this committee has looked at before, that the League of Minnesota Cities has supported for a number of years, is trying to get at an issue with, even those cities that do receive MSA funding, that funding often has lagged over the years and is limited to 20% of a city's roads, and there are additional needs there that we support additional ways to look at that and support those communities as well. So I want to then just close to keep things very brief with the underlying bill provides an opportunity for me to talk about one of my greatest hits, which is the Corridors of Commerce program. Also say just a quick round of thank yous, because there is a continuation in the underlying bill of the $25 million per year that goes into the cash portion of that program. Representative Petersburg, I think, had a key role in, I think it was 2017, of first putting that money into the base budget. That has gone a long way into funding a number of the environmental engineering, land acquisition components of some of the non-bondable aspects of some of the Corridors of Commerce projects over the years. So thank you to, the governor, Chair Hornstein, and folks for looking to continue that this year and reauthorize that appropriation. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have Sherry Munyon, followed by Emily Murray. Ms. Munyon, please state your name for the record and proceed with the testimony.
Mr. Chair, members, my name is Sherry Munyon, and I'm here today representing the Minnesota Public Transit Association. MIPTA supports multiple revenue sources such as the sales tax on auto parts, increasing MVEST, and implementing a package delivery fee, all of which can be used for Greater Minnesota Transit as well as bridges and roads, including townships and cities. It is critical that funds for Greater Minnesota Transit are included in the base budget, and we request also a 2-year reduction in the required local share, while our rural communities continue to struggle with limited resources. One example of the financial pressures they're facing is the increased cost of vehicle purchases. Buses have increased 40%, and this cost has come after buses were already on order and not in their budgets. MIPTA supports the microtransit proposal for our suburban systems and supports the metro sales tax, together with funding for bike and ped. To me, this is a clear case of we all do better when we all do better. Most riders in Greater Minnesota use transit because they cannot drive or do not have access to a vehicle. It is often difficult to get a ride from others in rural areas. Among the rural riders surveyed, 75% had household incomes below $25,000. 2/3 did not have access to a vehicle. And 26%, only 26% had a driver's license. 63% of the riders reported having a disability. Work trips are actually the most common type of transit trip in Greater Minnesota for most of the agencies that were surveyed. At least half or more of the respondents use transit for getting to work. Nearly all ride multiple times a week, and many ride to work every workday. 63% stated transit was a very important part of their life. Without it, they would lose their jobs. Supporting local jobs provides further economic benefit to local communities, as those workers then spend their money in the community supporting other local businesses. A win-win again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Emily Murray, and followed by Sarah Erickson. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Emily Murray with the Association of Minnesota Counties. AMC is a voluntary association representing all of Minnesota's 87 counties. On behalf of AMC and the Minnesota County Engineers Association, we want to offer our support for House File 1992, as well as for the ideas put forward in the A1 amendment. AMC and MCEA have long advocated for the need for statewide increased transportation dollars. One of our top priorities this year and for the past several years is support for a comprehensive transportation funding bill that includes new dedicated revenue for roads, bridges, and transit. The need for increased transportation revenue is even more important now than in recent years. Despite a record state surplus, HUTD revenues are down. The County State Aid Highway Fund received $17.5 million less in 2023 than it did in 2022. For many years, counties have supported an all-of-the-above approach to finding solutions for transportation funding. We ultimately believe the solution should be comprehensive, balanced, sustainable, and dedicated. We support the increases in the constitutionally dedicated funding sources found in this proposal that would bring additional revenue to the CASAF fund. Additionally, counties support the creation of the local disaster support account included in the bill. In the event that a disaster occurs, local agencies need to react to and address potentially significant safety issues with culvert failures, roadway collapses, slope failures, and other things that could make traveling on a roadway a serious safety concern for those who drive, walk, and bike. Creating a new local disaster support account with funding directed to MnDOT and administered by state aid would allow for better customer service and improved coordination with local agency project needs and funding for these needs. On behalf of AMC and MCEA, we want to thank Governor Walz and Chair Hornstein and members of the committee for your commitment to transportation funding this session, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much. And now we have Sarah Erickson, followed by Bentley Graves. State your name for the record and please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Sarah Erickson. I'm here today on behalf of the Minnesota Regional Rail Association. I'm here today to voice opposition to Article 3, Section 13 of the bill, the Railroad Company Assessment. When this provision was originally passed into law, my predecessor, John Abitz, there was an agreement between the legislature and the railroads that we would pay for one of the 4 inspectors for 2 years, and that provision would be allowed to sunset. That did not happen. And not only are we now paying for 4 inspectors, but this provision in this bill, MnDOT is asking us to pay for all 6 inspectors. With a $17.5 billion surplus, surely there's enough money at MnDOT that they can pay for the inspectors they believe they need. Across our networks, railroads already employ thousands of well-trained inspectors who are qualified per the Federal Railroad Administration. They monitor and assess the health and safety of the equipment that moves essential goods and materials on the track that spans nearly 140,000 miles. In addition to conducting the various inspections required by the FRA, railroads have for decades voluntarily invested in testing, implementing, and advocating for advanced inspections and technology. Given the choice between investing in technology that is better able to detect even the smallest crack in wear and tear versus paying for additional inspectors at MnDOT, the railroads would choose to invest in technology. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you very much. Mr. Graves, please state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Again, my name is Bentley Graves from the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to share a few thoughts about the remarks that the chair made earlier about the TAB fee proposals that are contained in the underlying bill, but also in the A1. And he mentioned that the TAB fee proposal in the A1 was kind of to give the committee a sense that there is another option besides what the governor put forward. We would certainly agree with that and maybe take that a step further and know that there are other options yet beyond what's contained in either the A1 or the governor's proposal. You know, he mentioned too that there has been interest at different times from folks on both sides of the aisle and folks from the business community, and that is certainly true in looking at the TAB fee setup as a means for increasing investment in the system. We would note that, however, there may be a better way to do it in a way to do it that's more grounded in the policy of where we stand today. 2008 was, I believe, the last time we really kind of changed things with regard to TAB fees. At that point, cars on the road were on the road for about 10 years. Now, fast forward to 2023, cars are on the road for much longer, about 12 years now. We think that there is good policy reason for looking at the depreciation schedule that is part of the TAB fee calculation. And that is something that there has been some bipartisan interest in over the years. That is something that we have been open to discussion about for a number of years now. So I want to share that with the committee as yet a third option potentially. And certainly want to make ourselves available to working with the chair and others as this moves forward. But thank you for the opportunity to add those thoughts here briefly at the end.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graves. Is there anyone who has not testified that would like to today? All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So if, would you like to walk through the specific sections of the bill, or would you like Mr. Burris to do that, or what would you like?
Mr. Chair, I think what we'll do, just for time's sake, I can go through a few areas where, you know, perhaps there's some differences, important differences with you know, an approach that we may want to take versus what's here in terms of House File 1992. But, you know, generally there is agreement. But on some of the big ticket items, I did want to just take a couple minutes, Mr. Chair, to
please do
alert the committee to, things that may be a little bit different in terms of perspective. So, we've mentioned the tab fee issue, and Mr. Graves, I will definitely be talking to you. I'd like to hear some of your ideas more specifically. But that is, an area of, where we have a difference of opinion. Here's a spoiler alert on the, metro sales tax. The governor has a 1/8% increase. We'll be looking at this more specifically on Thursday. It would be my intention to have a higher amount for that. We've passed a higher amount through the House floor on 2019 and 2021, and so just to let people know that is an area where we have some differences. There are some other articles and sections that I think are important. We'll be hearing the sections some pieces of sections 1 and 2 in Article 3, actually 1 through 3, I believe, with Representative Reams' bill tomorrow night. So that's included. We also, in terms of the rail company assessment, I just wanted to respond and say that it's been a long practice that we've asked the railroad companies to fund this, and particularly with the disaster in Ohio recently, I think having some additional inspections is good public policy. We've had a number of members that have had specific bills introduced related to grade crossings. Not necessarily on this committee, but just broader throughout the House, and we take that very seriously. And so, Section 14 is very important. I've already talked about Section 16 in terms of the metro sales tax. I also wanted to note on Section 20, Representative Novotny has had a similar bill, and I think that some of his concerns are addressed in Section 20. Those are some of the highlights, I think, in terms of the bill that I wanted to underline for the committee.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And we do have agencies here to be able to answer questions as they come up. So discussion on the bill. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and there are a couple of questions as I was reviewing Mr. Lee's revenue sheet that's out in front of us. I noticed that the surcharge for the renewals, vehicle registration renewals, are being split between small cities and large cities.
Representative Petersburg, which one are you looking at specifically?
The spreadsheet that Andrew Lee put together.
The 1992 A1?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just to make sure everybody's on the same page.
And that, even though that's for the amendment itself, it's part of the bill in different amounts. But I noticed that in that particular one, you'd split up between that number between the small cities and large cities, but not townships. And so I was curious about that. And the other question was, you made a change in regards to the distribution of MVest for Metropolitan Area Transit and Greater Minnesota Transit, heavily impacting Greater Minnesota. Is that because of the sales tax increase that you're proposing? Those are the questions.
Thank you. Chair Hornstein.
Correct. I'll take the second question first. And great minds think alike, Representative Petersburg. Yes. We feel that the needs of the metropolitan region when it comes to transit will be addressed in the metro sales tax proposal. So to answer your question, yes. On your first question, there are a number of items that really need to be examined here as we look at new revenue. And it's not just large cities. I've been contacted by the collar counties in the metropolitan area, that are interested in some additional, revenue beyond what we've talked about extensively here in the committee, when we talk about small cities and townships. So we have large cities. We have, as we learned in the hearing we had, where we had various local governments testifying, there's a lot of non-CASA expenses that cities and counties have. So it's not just the 62-29-9 formula that we need to address when we look at unmet needs. And so, we're gonna be looking at how these revenue raisers can address things outside of the traditional formula that we look at. And so these are two examples of that. And there's other examples too that I mentioned now that, again, we'll be sifting through, and so much of this does depend on our target. So it's very difficult now to, pinpoint those exact amounts, but I did want to put this out here for discussion purposes.
Representative Petersburg.
For now, I think that'll be great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, a quick question on corridors of commerce funding. Is there any corridors of commerce funding in here?
There is, I believe that Mr. Zart had referenced that, but I'm sorry, I don't have the exact page number before me. Maybe Mr. Burris can find that.
Mr. Burris.
Mr. Chair, Representative West, you'll see that on the underlying bill, page 8, there's appropriation of $25 million in each year. So under the governor's proposal, it would continue, that's the same as base for just ongoing corridors funding.
Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did hear Representative Petersburg's bill to add $100 million there. I think especially when you're raising all these taxes, I mean, there's numerous tax increases in here with a gigantic budget surplus. It's, at least I'd love to see it be dumped into corridors of commerce. And I know you prioritize transit, but if we're gonna get Highway 65 was number 9 on the list and the last corridors of commerce list, if it's only gonna be this much, there is very little chance, unless we go to earmarks, and we love having that conversation.
Chair Hornstein.
I'll just say, Mr. Chair and Representative West, again, we're prioritizing needs all over the state in all modes. And so, again, our intention is to have a balanced bill. Again, in terms of roads, bridges, transit, bike, walk, support, urban, suburban, exurban, rural, small cities, this bill really is going to be comprehensive. So, again, there's multiple priorities that need attention, and we're gonna hear a little bit tomorrow night about a new program that I'll be proposing, and that is kind of a corridors of commerce type program for safety. And I think Highway 65 and a number of different corridors would be potentially eligible for that too.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I have one. Chair Hornstein, could you please reiterate what's going on since Representative West discussed surplus? Like, how is transportation funding differing from what's going on in the overall surplus side of things, and how our transportation funds are looking today?
Well, I think Mr. Chair, I think Representative West did, I think referred to this earlier in the hearing, maybe it was another member of the committee. But again, I think it's worth noting that the dedicated funds for transportation have been lagging behind the forecasts and usage for those funds. And so I would hearken back to an earlier hearing we had in January where MnDOT came. There was a bar graph that had a lot of red in it, and the red were for deficits in MVEST, in gas tax receipts, et cetera. So while there is a surplus in general fund that I think can be used for many other things, we do have a deficit, or at least if not a deficit, it's funds lagging behind forecast. And that does create kind of a situation where we're running behind in transportation, not ahead when it comes to funding. And there's a lot of reasons for that. COVID situation, the slump that took place, but there's ongoing structural issues in our transportation funds. And so, again, I appreciate the question, and again, I don't remember who had mentioned this earlier in the conversation this morning. I think it was in the context of Representative Petersburg's bill. But we do have to understand moving forward that the transportation funds are separate from the general fund, and they are not doing well, and that, I think, increases the urgency of action in terms of revenue in this bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Closing comments on your bill.
Well, thank you, members, and I appreciate the discussion today. Again, we covered two very important topics today in terms of how we build our bill and in terms of revenue, and that's the auto parts sales tax and the tab fee increase. And again, Representative Petersburg, you reminded me in your comments, I focus so much on tab fees, but we do have a slight increase in the MVest from 6.5 to 6.875. And so that will provide some additional revenue and then an additional fee, a registration fee. So again, those are smaller numbers, but nonetheless are included in the A1 amendment, with which I withdrew, and are, I want the committee to know, are under active consideration for inclusion in the bill. So we did those, and we're gonna spend some time on Thursday on the Metro sales tax and on the delivery fee. Those were items that were mentioned in various public testimony, and look forward to that discussion on Thursday as well, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I renew the motion that House File 1992 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. And so with that, we're running a little bit ahead.
Oh, Mr. Chair, one other thing, yes, another thing that we're gonna be considering is that addition, again, someone had mentioned this in their testimony, that additional fee on the TNCs, the Ubers, the Lyfts, et cetera, that will be under consideration as well. That bill was introduced last week, I believe.
Perfect. Would you like to close this out for the meeting, or want me to do that from up here?
You
or
should do that from your perch as the chair.
Representative Petersburg.
So we're going to be here tomorrow night and Thursday, not Friday.
Representative Petersburg, so we are here, this is exactly what I was going to get into, is that, tomorrow, so Wednesday, March 22nd, we'll be in room 10 of the State Office Building. What time is that? At 6 p.m. So tomorrow night, 6 p.m., State Office Building, room 10, and we'll have 4 bills that are on the calendar for that time, and it will be Thursday morning here, and nothing currently for Friday.
All right.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Mr. Chair?
No, that's the schedule that we have it as of now.
All right,
Perfect.
thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned.